Right, Venus, the 50 faces of a goddess by 50 different painters, spreading over about 2,500 to 3,000 years. And you can see there on the right, yours truly, in the Louvre in 1992, looking up at one face of Venus, the Venus de Milo. I know it was 1992 because it was our silver wedding anniversary, and we'd awarded ourselves a few days in Paris at the time. I had rather more hair then, and also a darker color, as you can see. So Venus de Milo, a 2nd century BC statue rediscovered on the island of Milos, hence its name, in 1820. Now, to Plato and the ancient Greeks, she was, of course, Aphrodite, but Venus, if you were from the Roman Empire, an earthly icon, while at the same time inspiring love among the gods on Olympus. Now, Plato had something to say about Venus. He said that the contemplation of her physical beauty inspired an understanding of spiritual beauty. Well, we'll see. So here we have 3 very early versions of what it was imagined she might have looked like had she been, had she actually existed. On the left, you can see the terracotta statue of Venus unearthed in Western Turkey in the 6th century BC in a temple, in fact, dedicated to the goddess Aphrodite. Of course, we're talking in terms of the name Aphrodite at the moment. The goddess's pose is based on an even earlier statue made by the sculptor Phidias. In accordance with later Hellenistic tastes, the sculptor chose to depict her semi-nude, possibly to emphasize her sensuality. The goddess's outstretched hand, originally, it's thought, held an offering, probably either a dove or a bowl. The figurine was originally painted bright. We know that because it still bears traces of red paint. Then the statue in the center, which is a more conventional Aphrodite that we're used to seeing. This is the Aphrodite of Cnidus, who was an ancient Greek sculpture by Praxiteles of Athens around the 4th century BC. It's one of the earliest life-size representations of the nude female form. Praxiteles' Aphrodite is shown nude, reaching for a bath towel while protecting her modesty, though she's happy to leave her breasts exposed. Up until this point, Greek sculpture had been dominated by male nude figures. The original Greek sculpture is no longer in existence, but many Roman copies survive, and this is one of them. Then on the right, we've got an Aphrodite, the Aphrodite of Menophantos. This is a Roman statue, but it's actually sculpted by a Greek. It was found in a monastery in Rome. It bears the signature of Menophantos, the Greek sculptor of the 1st century BC, of whom absolutely nothing is known. So there we have 3 sculptures of Aphrodite, or Venus on the right. So that's all the sculptures I'm going to show you today. Now we're talking paintings. And this, of course, was probably the most famous representation of Venus by Sandro Botticelli, The Birth of Venus. It's iconic, of course. You'll find it in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. Botticelli was an Italian painter of the early Renaissance. His reputation suffered until the Pre-Raphaelites stimulated a reappraisal of his work. The Birth of Venus depicts the goddess Venus arriving at the shore at her birth. The wind god Zephyr blows her to the shore, and there's another young female also alongside. We don't know who she is. It's said that a Platonic understanding of the painting might have been intended to lift 15th century minds to thoughts of divine love. So this is probably the earliest representation of Venus on a canvas. As you can see, 1486, that's pretty early. That's almost contemporary with the Battle of Bosworth, is it not? 1485, I think, year after, so give it some context. So I won't dwell on this painting too long because you're all extremely familiar with it, I'm sure. You won't be familiar with this one, I fancy. This one was painted in 1500 by Giulio Campagnola, and this is Venus and Mars. We'll be seeing quite a lot of Venus and Mars in the forthcoming paintings. It's a rather understated painting. Mars looks anything but macho, I think. He's got a rather feminine face, I would have said. And we know it's Mars because the helmet is there, and the spear, his spear is well, it's pointing, it's almost stabbing his right foot at the moment. Anyway, he's inverted it to show the fact that he's not aggressive at this particular moment. And Venus, of course, we can't see much of Venus's face. She's got her famous red hair there, and that's about all we can see of Venus. It's quite a soft-hued painting, very early painting, 1500. I better tell you something about the artist. He was primarily an Italian engraver, but also an early Renaissance painter. He died in his 30s. Venus and Mars were lovers, despite the fact that she was married to Vulcan, who is usually described as lame and ugly. As we will see in subsequent paintings, Vulcan caught them together in an invisible net created in his forge. He exposed them to the other gods to ridicule and laughter on Mount Olympus. Now, the next painting is by an artist that, again, you probably are not aware of, Lorenzo Costa. Lorenzo Costa, we don't know too much about this artist, except that he was another Italian Renaissance painter. This one is more conventionally painted, I think. We've got the chiaroscuro dark background there, and so that the flesh is well lit, as you can see. And then again, she's got that drape over her strategic part of her anatomy. I'm not quite sure what to call that article of clothing. It just looks like a drape to me, but little research has thrown up words like strophic and peblos and chiton for garments that women might have worn in those days. Now, this is a much more familiar painting to you, I'm sure, and certainly a more familiar name. This is Titian, and this is Venus with a mirror. We're going to see this convention again subsequently with Cupid. This is Cupid's first appearance, of course. Cupid actually holding the mirror up so that we get the reflection or some sort of reflection of Venus in the mirror. Titian was another Renaissance Venetian painter and thought to be the most important member of the 16th century Venetian school. We've already had a talk on Titian, so I'm not going to dwell on this painting too much. It's a very finely executed painting, as you can see. Not sure who the other cherub is, or the other one with the puffed cheeks and about to crown her with a laurel wreath, I think. But we've got to assume that Cupid is the one holding the mirror, because that's what he does. Cupid, of course, was her son, and according to what stories of mythology you read, he's often portrayed as being blind. Now then, this painting is far more risque, shall I say. This is by Paolo Veronese, also an Italian Renaissance painter based in Venice, known for large paintings of religious subjects and mythology. Along with Titian and Tintoretto, he is one of the great trio that dominated the late Renaissance of the 16th century. This is Venus and Adonis. We shall see Adonis again in several subsequent paintings, but never quite so, what can I say, quite so bold as we can see him here, I don't think. Adonis was a beautiful Greek hero, although he was Syrian by birth. Venus fell in love with him, though she had a rival in Persephone. I don't want to get bogged down in Greek mythology at the moment because we're looking at paintings. But suffice it to say at this point, Adonis was gored by a wild boar during a hunting trip and died in Aphrodite's arm. So there we have a mid-16th century painting. And as you can see, it's quite an interesting painting from the point of view of Cupid, I think. Cupid steals a lot of these paintings, and he's not very happy about Adonis's attentions to his mother, I don't think. He seems to be pulling on her clothing, and he looks rather cross-patched to me. He hasn't got his, he's got his quiver there, but I don't see much evidence of his bow. The painting, apart from being framed by the drapery above, got dogs on either side of it. You can see two hounds on the left and one on the right. And it's curious that the flesh tones, particularly of Adonis, have got a sort of gilt bronze tint to them, which I can only assume is a reflection from the drapery on the extreme right. So that's Veronese's idea of Venus and Adonis. Now this is quite a different painting. This is slightly earlier by Hans Baldung Green. From a name like that, you might assume, and quite rightly so, that he's German, or was German, I should say. He was actually the student of Albrecht Dürer. So his art developed into the Mannerist movement of the late Renaissance, which it was also called Mannerist late Renaissance. Whereas the high Renaissance emphasized proportion, balance, and ideal beauty, Mannerism exaggerated these qualities, often resulting in asymmetrical or artificial elegance, until, of course, the Baroque movement came along and took over from it in the early 17th century. Cupid is called Amor here, and he's on the small side, I think. He's slightly out of proportion, and he's pestering his mother for whatever. Her red hair is contrasted very well with her green drapery, her green clothing, which she's cast off for the delectation of the viewer's gaze, I suppose, as far as green is concerned. But of course, green and red are complementary colors and work very well together. I'm not sure quite what Cupid is sitting on. It looks like an overgrown gourd or something like that, maybe. Again, we've got the very dark background without any detail at all, emphasizing the Venus, the flesh tones of Venus herself. So now we come to another German. This is Lucas Cranach. This is Cupid complaining to his mother Venus. This is a rather strange painting. Again, early 16th century. She's hanging on to a branch there with her left hand, and then her legs seem to be either side of a branch. A toe is rather pronounced in the way it points away from her foot, and I'm not sure that he's got the proportions right or the actual stance right of this right leg either. But anyway, that's Lucas Cranach's version, and there we've got, as I say, Cupid seems to be bothered by flies. There's little spots all over him, and he seems to be wiping flies away from his brow, and that's perhaps what he's complaining about. He's complaining about the flies. And she's got Cupid here has got a very curious crown or halo, or not quite sure what it is about her. And of course, we've got some landscaping on the extreme right here, as you can see. Now, I'll tell you something about Cranach now. This is actually Lucas Cranach the Younger. He was another German Renaissance painter and a portrait painter, and his father and son were also painters. The Cranach family enjoyed a high status in Wittenberg post the Reformation. Cranach the Younger was also a successful businessman and politician. So that's Lucas Cranach's version. Now we come to a painting by Paris Baudon. Again, this is Cupid is called Amor, and this is mid-16th century, as you can see. He was also a Renaissance painter, but from Venice this time, not Germany. Though tutored by Titian, like the previous two, he also veered towards the Mannerist tradition, or the late Renaissance tradition. And again, Cupid seems to steal the show, doesn't he? Look at that crosspatch face of his. He's not happy about something. He's pointing one of his arrows straight at his mother. We're not sure what his problem is. And Venus there is spread out and completely nude. She's not bothering to cover her modesty in any shape or form. We've got the red hair again of Venus. Venus's hair will change color as we go along, you'll find. And she's got some plant, and I'm ashamed to say I forgot to research what that plant is, but it's probably got a significance. So perhaps somebody else may be able to tell us at the end of the talk what they think that plant is and why she's holding it. So there we are. That's Paris Baudon. I haven't got much more to say about him. So this next artist who's painting Venus is Alessandro Allori. He's another painter in the Mannerist tradition, born in Florence in 1535. He was mainly a portrait painter and possibly the last of the Mannerists before the Baroque movement occupied subsequent painters. So again, it's interesting from the point of view of Cupid again. Cupid quite a lot older in this painting, and this is the first time we see the doves appear. We're going to see this pair of doves often in these paintings in the course of the morning. So quite what Cupid's beef is this time, I don't know, but they both got making eye contact with each other, and there's some meaningful staring going on there. I notice he's got red hair this time, and she has as well, but it's a lot dark. Maybe she's taken his bow off him, and he's not very pleased about it. And she's certainly restraining his right hand there. So she's perhaps admonishing him for careless work or whatever with his bow. Notice the golden apple at the bottom there. The golden apple. If you remember your mythology, Paris was instructed to decide between the beauty of three goddesses, of which Venus was one, and was awarded, whoever won the beauty contest was awarded a golden apple, and of course Venus won that contest, and as a result she gave him for his prize Helen of Troy. Quite a large painting, this one, 56 by 89 feet, which is almost 7 foot across, is it not? This one is by Parma il Giovanni. Now this is Venus at Vulcan's Forge, which is of course where she lived among other places because she was married to Vulcan. Again, we've got Cupid getting very much in and on the act. They're enjoying a mother-son embrace there. Perhaps enjoying it a little bit too much, I don't know, for our tastes. He was an Italian painter from Venice again, and a notable exponent of the Venetian school. After Tintoretto's death, he became Venice's dominant artist. He rejected Mannerism and tended towards a style of Tintoretto, with whom he worked on the Doge's Palace alongside Veronese, who we've just seen. So again, this is fairly large painting. I don't think any of these characters on the left are necessarily Vulcan. They probably just blacksmiths working in his forge, I would imagine. But it's a nice little cameo on the left of the picture there. And we've got that red drapery again. We've already seen that. And I quite like the way the blue of the sheeting that she's lying on is reflected in the wings of Cupid. So that's Parma Il Giovane's version. Now we've come to another familiar name, Rubens. And if you remember, we've dealt with Rubens at some length in a talk in January, in fact, and time fly. And again, we've got the convention of Cupid holding up the mirror. And so we get two Venuses for the price of one. Cupid in this instance is quite a muscly Cupid. And I notice his wings are multicolored, as you can see, rather than the blue wings in the previous one. Both have reddish hair. And Venus is looking at herself in the mirror with her hand clasped to her breast. Is she horror struck at her own image, or is she highly delighted? We don't know. Rubens dealt, as I said, Rubens, we are well and truly with Rubens, we are well and truly into the Baroque period of the 17th century. He's famous, of course, for his sumptuous women, painted in his own unique, flamboyant style. And then we come to his most famous pupil, Anthony van Dyck. Anthony van Dyck, a Flemish painter, a Baroque artist who became the leading court painter in England after his early success in the Netherlands and in Italy. He's best known for his portraits of aristocracy, notably Charles I. His influence on portrait painting in Britain lasted for decades. Now there we've got a slightly new convention, because he's actually painting George Villiers, the Marquis of Buckingham, the Marquis of Buckingham, and his wife Catherine Manners, but he's painted them as though they are Venus and Adonis. So they've shed their 17th century clothing, and he's clothed them semi-nakedly. I'm not sure how they reacted to this painting. I'd be interested to know whether there's a little bit too much flesh being shown by what were essentially aristocracy, or minor aristocracy in those days. But this is another, it's obviously a commission painting, and they must have agreed to his interpretation of them, and the likeness, I'm sure, would have been a good likeness for the two. So that's an interesting take on the painting of Venus, I think. Not too much of Venus about her, but she's got red hair. Did she have red hair when she lived? I don't know. And again, very fond of this red drapery, the red features an awful lot. I suppose it's because of the red hair that it's tending to reflect that. So now we come on to another artist that we dealt with at length in a talk almost two years ago. It was certainly well into COVID anyway, and that's Artemisia Gentileschi. This is Sleeping Venus. Because she was an Italian Baroque painter and the first female artist we've encountered so far in this talk. As you'll perhaps remember, she painted in the style of Caravaggio, hence the dark background. We've already seen that in several of the previous paintings. And she was one of the most accomplished 17th century artists, producing fine work even at the early age of 15. Look at the way she's painted this cushion here, and to match the drapery, the red drapery again over there. I mean, it is extremely accomplished painting. There's no two ways. Perhaps the most accomplished painting we've seen so far. I think Cupid is fanning her here. He seems to be fanning her, and she's given him blue wings again for whatever reason. And Venus is virtually nude, apart from this diaphanous shawl or whatever it is that is sort of trying to cover her, but unsuccessfully. Then we've got this rather ugly painting, dark painting on the extreme left, which I don't think does the painting any service at all. In actual fact, it would be better if there was something that's less likely to attract our attention. It's going to distract us from Venus, but a very accomplished painting, as I'm sure you'll agree. Now then, the relationship between Cupid and between son and mother has deteriorated somewhat here. He's getting a jolly good thrashing, but what he's done we don't know. But she's got hold of his hair rather cruelly, I think, and she's got some twigs in her hand there, which she's leathering him with these twigs. And we got the doves again. They've reappeared, but they look alarmed at the scene as well. So Jan van Bijlert, I would suggest, has got his tongue in cheek over this painting. And she's pretty well clothed. In fact, being a Dutch 17th century genre painter, she could be a Dutch woman quite easily, I think. And I think that's probably the clothing is 17th century Dutch clothing. I don't know who this character is. We often seem to get a second Cupid or cherub in the painting, so it must be his friend. Maybe he's been up to no good with his friend. We don't know. He was Jan van Bijlert was a Golden Age painter from Utrecht who spent many years in Italy, where his style again was heavily influenced by Caravaggio, as you can see. He was a prolific painter, apparently, who left behind him some 200 paintings, but it wouldn't surprise me if you haven't come across that name before. Now, this is Nicolas Poussin, whose name you will have come across, and we're well and truly into the Baroque style now, busy Baroque. Although he spent most of his working life in Rome, he was a French painter, of course. He returned to Paris for a brief period as a court painter to Louis XIII. And he favoured line over colour, although he made a speciality of movement, the dancing and salmon pink. And salmon pink is well remembered from his famous painting, Dance to the Music of Time, which is in the Wallace collection in Manchester Square, where you've got the three graces dancing and the flowing salmon clothing is what sticks in your mind, as is the case here, although this isn't quite so tastefully painted, I don't think. So we've got an awful lot going on in this painting, this being a Baroque painting. Cupid's down on the bottom floor here, on the ground, I should say. We've got this character here. He could be Neptune with the horses representing waves. I don't think he's Mars. And this obviously is Venus, right in the center of the painting. And she's coming out of the sea, as Venus does. And then we've got all these other cherubs up here, the seraphim and cherubs and putti. And then we've got this curious barge. Is this Zeus? I don't know. On riding, it's a chariot, I think, and it's riding on the clouds, or being borne on the clouds. So Poussin at his most flamboyant, I think. Then this is this one you'll be familiar with, the Rockaby Venus. Velázquez is Venus, and Velázquez is another artist we've already dealt with, the Toilet of Venus. And again, we've got the convention of her looking into a mirror being supported by Cupid, a rather demure Cupid this time, behaving himself for once. And again, this time we've got the back of Venus, and there's beautiful contoured, beautiful lines. I don't want to dwell too much on Rockaby Venus because we've talked about it before in the past. Her hair is still reddish, I suppose, reddish brown, veering towards brown maybe. So that's Velázquez's version of Venus. And another familiar artist, of course, is Rembrandt. He also painted Venus and Cupid. Now this is a more loving portrayal of the two. As you can see, she's caressing his, holding his head in her fingers, and he's clasping towards her. Very much a face there that mirrors the Dutch women of the 17th century, I would say. A rather homely, homespun face, and Cupid there is shown to be very fond of his mother, and not much more we can say about that painting, really. Of course, Rembrandt, considered to be one of the greatest painters of all time, his works depicted a wide range of subject matter, including mythological themes. And like many artists of the age, such as Vermeer, for instance, Rembrandt was also an avid art collector and dealer. Then we'll veer now from a name you're very familiar with to one that you're probably not, and that's Francesco Salamina. And again, we find Venus at the forge of Vulcan, where she was often because she was married to Vulcan, and Vulcan often described as being ugly and lame, though not much evidence of either attribute in this painting, I don't think. But of course, this is Mars. He's at the. I've thrown myself slightly there by the title, because she's at the forge of Vulcan, but she's obviously in a liaison with Mars. Obviously, it's Mars because we've got his armor there, and Cupid is holding his helmet, and he's got Mars is gesticulating about his shield, it would seem to be, or gesticulating about something. And she's rather more clothed than normal than we're used to seeing her. And she got hold of his sword there, I think. So maybe she's dissuading him from venting his anger on somebody or other. I don't know. What can we say about Francesco Salamina? Not much, actually. He was a prolific Italian painter in the Baroque era, working mainly out of Naples. So an accomplished painting, very colourful painting. And we got the salmon pink again of the clothing, which reminds us of Poussin's artwork. So there we are. Let's let you look at that for a moment. And then we've got Sebastiano Ricci. This is Venus and Cupid. This painting resides in London. And if you think that's a strange spelling of Chiswick, well, I did as well, but apparently that's what it's actually called. So here we've got Ricci's version of Venus. Venus has had her hair done almost in the modern style, I think. There's a lot of work gone into her hair. She's got hold of one of Cupid's arrows, which he's hoping to retrieve from her. So what she's going to do with it, I don't know. She might just be explaining to him what he's supposed to do with this arrow. It's quite a nice composition. There's a nice sweeping line of her figure there, and then we go back up. We go from the doves. We go back up past Cupid, back up to her head. So it's almost like an oval shape there. And we got these two characters here. We don't know who they are. Are they men? Are they women? I think they're women, but they seem to be in some sort of embrace. So that's Ricci's fanciful expression. As a young man, he was accused of attempting to poison a woman he had made pregnant in order to avoid marriage. This is the artist, of course, I'm talking about. And he was imprisoned, but released after the intervention of his patron, a noble. He eventually married the woman in 1691, although it's said their union was very stormy. If you can remember about Caravaggio, he was often getting bailed out by his patrons because they wanted him to carry on painting. So this painting is very much in the Baroque style again. It's a very accomplished painting. And I'll leave you to make up your mind of what you think about it. Herman van der Mijn was a Dutch 18th century painter, and having said that, that's all I can say about him, really. Venus has been matched up with Ceres, the god of, well, it's where we get the name, the word cereal from, isn't it? She's the god of harvests and cornfields and the like. And this, we've got to assume, is Ceres on the extreme right there. And Cupid is not too much in evidence in this painting. He seems to be clawing his way into the picture from the right again. And Venus, we can't see Venus's face. She's so much in darkness there. All we get to see really is her torso and her breast. And that's about it really. And there are some spilled items down here. So that's rather a curious painting by Herman van der Meyen. So we'll pass on from that one. There's a much more obvious painting from the point of view of what's going on in it. Now we're moving slightly out to the Baroque period into the Rococo style now. Lemoyne was a French Rococo painter and the first court painter to Louis XV. He was also a tutor of Francois Bouget, and with him we are now, as I said, very much into the Rococo style from the busy Baroque style, the Baroque. And the Rococo, you could say, is Baroque and then some. The Rococo style began in France roughly about the time of this painting in the 1730s and is considered by many to be the closing act of the Baroque movement. Its paintings were overly ornamental and theatrical, often combining exuberant swags and scrolling curves, over-the-top gilding, warm pastel in-your-face colours and melodramatic romantic scenes, bordering on chocolate box kitsch, if you like. And I think this painting easily exemplifies all that. Very bright painting, very theatrical. Cupid there sandwiched between Adonis and Venus, and Venus is trying to persuade Adonis not to go hunting. He's got his hunting dogs there, held by another child or servant, or but Cupid very much on his mother's side, pulling him back, pulling him away from the hunting. So it's very melodramatic. On the extreme left here, we've got a chariot, which must be Adonis's chariot. Whether it's to your taste or not, I don't know. It's not a large painting, sort of 3 foot by 2'6", something like that, very roughly. And you'd find it in Stockholm. It almost looks as though it's lit from the back, this painting. So that's Francois Lemoyne. Another name you may not be familiar with is Alessandro Magnasco. This is the Triumph of Venus, and this is very much in the Rococo style again. As I said, it's Baroque plus and then some. Venus, you can see down here, there's an awful lot going on in this painting. The figures in it and their various attitudes and poises and activities, they're completely dwarfed by these huge classical columns of this ruins, whatever the ruins is. And there amidst it all is Venus sitting there holding something in like a spear in her arm. I'm not quite sure why she's been triumphant in this case. And who the various figures are, I don't know. Here's a very hamish figure here, completely nude, male. And this one again, I can't see whether it's male or female really, but completely over the top. But very colourful, not over big, sort of 4 foot by 5 foot, I suppose. But very well exemplifies the Rococo style, I think. What do we know about Alessandro? He was an Italian late Baroque Rococo painter working out of Milan and Genoa, and is best known for stylized, fantastic landscapes characterized with swift brush strokes and flashes of bright color. Well, yes, I think we get the picture. This is another Rococo painting by Nicola Coipel. This is Madame de Conti as Venus. So again, as with the Marquis of Buckingham, Anthony van Dyck's painting, we've got a commissioned paint. We've got to assume this is a commissioned painting, but the lady, Madame de Conti, was obviously asked to be painted probably because she considers herself to be a beauty, as Venus. So that's what he's done. He's painted her as Venus. It's quite a light touch to this painting, as you can see. No red hair this time. In fact, it might be a nod towards her own natural coloured hair, so it's slightly greying, as you can see. And then because it's in this over the top Rococo style, we've got this garland of flowers, very colourful, but not doing a lot really, being thrown on like by this Cupid figure. And again, we've got another Cupid figure. So which one of these two is Cupid? Well, this one must be Cupid because he's got an arrow in his hand. But who this one is, we don't know. But he seems to be admonishing the Countess, I would say, with his finger raised like that. So there we are, very stylized painting, and I hope she enjoyed it. Another Rococo style painting. This is by Francois Bouget, whom I've already mentioned in connection with Francois Lemoyne. Now, he was an 18th century Rococo painter, draftsman, and an etcher. He's known for voluptuous paintings on classical themes, decorative allegories, and pastoral scenes. He was perhaps the most celebrated French painter of the 18th century. Along with his patron, Madame de Pompadour, he has become synonymous with the Rococo style. So again, this is full of color, full of everything really. It's all sorts of things going on, as you can see. A lot of drapery, a lot of folds and creases in the drapery, and it's hard to work out the chaise longue that she's sitting on. And again, we've got to assume this is Cupid, but then who is this one and who is this one? And she's squashing the two doves, or no, one dove, the other dove's down by her feet, isn't it? But she seems to be squashing this dove against her breast somehow with her right hand, sorry. And she looks very twee, doesn't she? Very demure, very twee. And her hair is, again, I wouldn't say her hair was red there. It's more a sort of not a strawberry blonde, but sort of light blonde, very light blonde. So I don't know whether Rococo is to your liking, but it isn't to mine. So the next painting is Louis Jean-Francois Lagrenier, and this is Mars and Venus again. So there they are, caught in flagrante delicto. And this Mars is a rather different Mars to the Mars we saw at the Forge of Vulcan. He's quite he's a pretty boy, isn't he, really? What we call today a pretty boy. He's got rather effeminate features, I would have said, and not a particularly masculine body either. She is well draped in the bed, and obviously they've just been, he's rising from in the morning, probably. They spent the night together, I would think. The doves are there. This dove is made a nest out of a little wicker basket on the floor there. And this dove seems to be bringing something. He's got something in his beak, so he's bringing something to the dove, enhancing the idea of unison and togetherness, I suppose. There is Mars's shield and sword, and we've got this huge green heavy drapery making a framework for the bed. So the bed is lit from the left, I would say, and the darkness, the dark background, of course, accentuates that. And we've got it's not a big, large picture, about 3 foot by 2'6" again, and she looks very demure. Her hair is red again. She's got a blue band in her hair, and she's still sleeping. And I suppose he's wondering about waking her up. What do we know of this painter? He was an 18th century Rococo painter. He was at one time court painter to Elizabeth, Empress of Russia, and director of the Academy of Arts in St. Petersburg, as well as later being the director of the French Academy in Rome and honorary director-curator of the Louvre. In 1804, Napoleon made him a Knight of the Legion d'Honneur. He wasn't to enjoy it for very long because he died the following year at the age of 80. So let's move on now to Goya, another very familiar name for you all. And there is Venus weeping traditionally over the slain body of Adonis, having been gored by a wild boar. Of course, Goya was a Spanish painter of the Romantic movement, which means, of course, we've left behind the Rococo art, which you may be happy to learn, and are now entering the Romantic movement, where realistic representation was combined with dramatic vistas and Gothic settings. Goya, considered by many to be the most important Spanish painter of the late 18th and early 19th centuries. His paintings and engravings tend to reflect contemporary events, and he's sometimes referred to as the last of the old masters and the first of the moderns. His later period culminated with the black paintings, which are on view in their own room, dedicated room in the Prado, a macabre assortment of hags, villains, and devils painted on the walls of his house, where he lived in near isolation. And it's a total mystery to me how they managed to take these frescoes from these interior walls and get them into the Prado. But there we are. No Cupid in this painting, you'll notice. Where is Cupid? Perhaps he doesn't like to see dead bodies. So we're moving towards the modern era now, when we come up with a name like Camille Corot. This is Venus bathing, and this is quite a new style, isn't it, from what we've been seeing this morning. We're veering towards the Impressionist style now. Rather a charming painting, I think. This is mainly done in browns, as you can see, and the browns, the light browns, the raw siennas and ochres are reflected in the tones of the flesh tones of her skin. Caro hasn't painted the lake where she's, or the pool where she's bathing. He's avoided painting water and in a traditional color, in traditional colors, but you can just see a reflection of her foot there to give the indication that this rather murky pool where she's bathing is actually there. And then the rest of the painting, the background of the painting, of course, very much we get the impression of a woodland behind her, and then an impression, and I stress the word impression, of a sky, dramatic sky there. Caro was pivotal in landscape painting, and his immense output in the neoclassical tradition anticipated the Impressionists, of whom Caro was a great supporter. So I think that's rather a charming painting. Then we come to our own Sir Joshua Reynolds. This is a curious painting, Cupid Untying the Zone of Venus, it's called. It's ended up in the Hermitage for some reason. And we've got a rather coy Venus there, very much in the modern 18th century style, I think. Both breasts exposed, but almost, almost, dare I say it, it's almost soft porn, isn't it, really? And she's sort of squinting. It's the look that she's got on her face that makes me say that, I think. She's sort of coquettishly looking behind the strange position of her arm there, and why Cupid is undressing her, we'll never know. But Joshua Reynolds, who was usually seen as an establishment painter of portraits, has let his hair down in this one, I think. It's quite an interesting painting, I must say, and a very interesting version of Venus. I mean, yes, quite a contrast there, I think. Joshua Reynolds was a Devonian by birth, and he was an 18th century English painter, as you know, mainly of portraits. He promoted the grand style, which depended on idealization of the imperfect. He was the founder of the Royal Academy of Arts in London and was knighted in 1769. I quite like the fiery reds in the background there, and she seems to have red hair. Is a very dark red hair there. It's mainly reflecting the reds, I think. Then we come to Benjamin West. Benjamin West was an American born in Pennsylvania, USA, but he lived and worked most of his life in London. He was entirely self-taught and specialized in historical scenes. Largely responsible for the launch of the Royal Academy, and he became its second president when Sir Joshua Reynolds, who snubbed him, died. It's said he turned down a knighthood because he'd set his heart on a peerage. So it rather suggests to me that he became a naturalized British citizen at some stage in his life. So this is a rather strange painting. It's melodramatic in many ways. I'm not quite sure what's happening to Venus's hair there, but it's veered towards red again, and we've got the red drapes there. Cupid is hanging on for dear life onto something. No, I don't think he is actually. I think he's stringing his bow, though we can't see the bowstring, but I think he looks as though he might be stringing his bow by the way he's got his bow tucked between his legs. And then we've got the doves there, but we've also got these swans. And of course, I suppose that's because she's coming out of the water. Venus at her birth, though she hasn't long been born of the sea. We've got elements of the sea right at the bottom of the painting there. These could be the three graces at the top, possibly. Oh, well, yes, it is. They are the three graces. Silly me, I can see it in the title now. They are the three graces. So it's rather stylized painting, I think, and rather in the Rococo style, maybe. And again, we've got the red clothing. And this is almost Baroque. The swans, there's so much going on with these swans at the bottom there, and their long necks, long serpentine necks, that I would suggest he's aping the Baroque or Rococo style. J.W.M. Turner. Now, this is an early Turner painting. It won't surprise me to say, it won't surprise you for me to say that. Painted in his 20s, painted in the Romantic tradition. Of course, Turner's known for his expressive imaginative landscapes and turbulent marine paintings. Turner was born in Covent Garden and lived in London almost all his life, apart from brief periods in Margate. Like Keats, he never lost his Cockney accent. He bequeathed his 550 oil paintings, 2,000 watercolours, and 30,000 works on paper to the nation. He never married, but he did father 2 daughters. So we can't really see much of Venus in this painting. She's completely obscured by Adonis there, and Adonis with his hunting dogs. So presumably he's off hunting again, and she's restraining him and telling him not to go hunting. I don't. Cupid, it was just about discernible on the clawing at Adonis's feet, trying to restrain him again. And who exactly Turner has put up in the trees here, we don't know, but they're putti of some description. So this is an early painting, and as I say, not typical of Turner by any means, as you'll certainly agree. Alexandra Shah's Guillemot. This is Mars and Venus surprised by Vulcan. So this time Vulcan is catching them in flagrante, and he's thrown this net which makes them invisible over them. We've got in the top right-hand corner of the painting, we've got the gods all looking on. There's I take that to be Zeus, but we've got Neptune's trident there, and we can probably work out who the various gods are if we can be bothered. We in the bottom corner, we've got the two doves. They're there again. Where is Cupid? Well, Cupid's been banished from the love scene, obviously. I think Guimau has given Vulcan a very strange, pensive look on his face. He doesn't seem particularly angry, but more bemused that he's found them, and he's leaning his head on his arm as though he's deep in thought about the situation. So that is a strange Attic pose, I think. And then again, we've got this pretty boy face of Mars, which is probably typical of the classical rendition of Mars, but certainly not a warrior face, I would have suggested. And we've got the usual accoutrements of Mars in the shield and the sword in the bottom left-hand corner there. And then we've also got the classical triangle here. Guimau has gone for the classical triangle, which is rather offset by the shape of the gods on Olympus looking down. An interesting painting, I would term that. This one is by James Ward. This is Venus rising from her couch, and notice the swans are back in this one. Doves are there as well on the extreme left, but the swans are much in evidence with their serpentine necks, and her body seems to almost ape the writhing of their slim necks as well. The way it stretches, it's almost like an inverted S. Oh, sorry, I've gone too far. I didn't mean to do that. There we are. Go back again. So this is not a large painting, 30 by 26. What can we say about James Ward? He was a British painter, particularly of animals, and belonged to the Romantic tradition. And having said that, I think we've said all there is of interest to say about James Ward, born in London. So she's got her red hair again. We've got the red drapery here. So he's certainly gone back to many of the depictions of Venus that we've seen this morning. And rather well painted vase there on the extreme left, I think, and the wood of the bed as well is well depicted. So it's an accomplished painting. We'd have to say that of it, but there's something unsatisfying about the way he's painted the body. It seems to be over elongated to me, but I as I said, I suggest it's influenced by these two swans. Now this is a detail of Courbet. I couldn't track down the original, and this is Venus and Psyche. Courbet was a French realist painter committed to painting only what he saw before him, and he rejected the earlier Romantic movement. He was an innovator and capable of making bold social statements through his work. Venus was jealous of Psyche's beauty and ordered her son Cupid to make her fall in love with an unworthy man. However, Cupid falls in love with Psyche himself. So that's the sort of background of this painting, but it leaves a lot of questions unanswered. Not entirely sure how this represents the myth. For instance, whom of these two figures is Psyche and who is Venus? I think we've got to assume this is Venus because she's traditionally painted and the expression on her face is rather sublime. But Psyche, we don't see too many renditions of Psyche, and she's black-haired. And she seems to be scattering leaves over Venus's face. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with this one, but that is another version of Venus that we're not used to. Now then, we seem to be back into the Rococo movement here, although this is mid 19th century, as you can see, with Alexandre Cabanel. This painting is in the Musée d'Orsay. He was a French 19th century painter and painted large canvases of historical, classical, and religious subjects. So this is a large, it's almost 100 inches long by 5 inches wide, I think. And there we got Venus riding on the waves, not coming out of a shell this time, a la Botticelli, but she's riding on the waves, and we've got all these putti above her. Well, you can't say any of these are Cupid. They just seem to be an affectation of the artist, I think. And I'm not sure he's got the perspective right with these waves. She could be riding on these waves here, I suppose, although she's an immensely large figure compared to the sea. But the waves around her feet surely should be larger, I think. So not a very well executed painting, I would suggest. And this one is by Gustave Moreau, Venus Rising from the Sea, another mid-19th century painting. It's a small painting, 22 by 18 inches. He was an important figure in the French Symbolist movement, aiming to represent absolute truth symbolically as a reaction against the Realist movement. In the 1890s, he was among its most significant painters. So it's there's an awful lot of detail gone into her jewelry. She's well bejeweled, and who these figures are either side of her, I don't know. And quite what this is going on here either, I don't know. So it's rather strange. And she's rising from the sea, but this doesn't look much like a sea to me. It looks more like a lake, not just a few ripples maybe. So that's the sort of painting you either really like or you don't. Now, Paul Cézanne's version of Venus and Cupid. We're getting towards the late 19th century and Impressionism, of course, although Cézanne was a post-Impressionist, but I would suggest that this is an fairly early Cézanne. It's said that Cézanne formed a bridge between the late Impressionists and the early 20th century avant-garde movements. It's a colourful painting, typically Cézanne in so much as it's dashed off or appears to be dashed off with quick, hurried strokes. Very little attention given to any sort of detail of her face, and Cupid is rather sketched in, not Cézanne's finest hour, I would say. Henri Picou painted his version of the birth of Venus. This is quite a flamboyant painting. He was another French painter of portraits and classical historical subjects, although he later moved on to allegorical and mythological themes. So there we've got, now he's resurrected the shell of Botticelli there. So he's played service towards the origins of the Birth of Venus paintings. And Cupid here hasn't got a bow and arrow, he's got a paddle. If this indeed is Cupid, and I take him to be Cupid, and he's been given a paddle. And then we've got, but Cupid often is depicted riding on board a dolphin as well, which is going on in this right-hand corner here. So it's a slightly confusing from that point of view. She's a bit off-center as well. And that seems to be to get this little flurry of figures, of faint figures in the top right-hand corner there. Not quite sure why. but rather in the Baroque tradition, this one, I would say. William Adolphe Bouguereau. This is another Birth of Venus, and quite a different one. And this is a huge painting, 10 foot by 7 foot. You'll find it in the Musée d'Orsay. He was a French realist painter using mythological themes with an emphasis on the female body. He liked to paint the female body. As a salon painter par excellence, he was absolutely abhorred by the Impressionists. And I think you can see that is anything but an Impressionist painting. It's a painting. It's a very accomplished painting. Look at the lines of Venus's body, and he's given her the long red hair, which is traditional, of course. But she's almost as though she stands out from the rest of the painting, as though she's been superimposed on the painting. She is in a shell, standing in a shell, a la Botticelli, and these various figures, mythological figures, are welcoming her arrival on shore. There's Cupid sitting on the dolphin, and he's looking up longingly at his mother, and she is looking down longingly on him. So their relationship is anything but stormy at the moment, but then again, we're right at the birth of their relationship, are we not? And then we've got all these putti again in the background, which I think the artist would have done well to leave out myself. Then we come to the only Impressionist painter who could be bothered who was interested enough to paint Venus. I can't find another Impressionist painter who concerned himself with her representation. Beth Morisot was a member of the famous Manet circle, of course. She married Eugene Manet, the brother of Edouard Manet, and joined the Salon de Refusé, the Impressionists, in the first of their exhibitions, which included the likes of Cézanne, Degas, Monet, Pissarro, Renoir, Sisley. And she went on to participate in all but one of the following 8 Impressionist exhibitions between 1874 and 1886. And there's no doubt that Beth Morisot deserves a talk exclusively to herself, and we'll put that right next year, I think. In this instance, we've got the doves again there. If this is Cupid, it's quite a grown-up Cupid. But this is undoubtedly Venus, and it's all as you can see, it's very, very much painted in the Impressionist style. It's almost pastel. The colors are pastel colors. You'd be forgiven thinking it wasn't a pastel, actually. And it's quite a large painting, sort of 4 foot by 5 foot, maybe. But the whole thing sort of melds into one. It's a vague swirl of shades and blues and pinks. A rather charming painting, I think. Now, in contrast, we've got a painting by Ettore Tito. Again, another Birth of Venus. No shell this time, but she's coming out of the sea, and somebody's grabbed hold of her and is making love to her almost instantly. So that's quite a daring painting, I would say. I'm not quite, this could be Neptune, of course. And we got the putti looking on, but quite who this character is who's grabbed hold of her, I'm not sure, but he's emphasizing the fact that she is a very desirable woman, I'm guessing. He was an Italian artist known for his paintings of contemporary life and landscapes in Venice, where he lived for most of his life. So it's not a particularly colorful painting, not a particularly impressive painting, and I wasn't able to track down the dimensions of this painting either, unfortunately. So we'll move on to Mario Cerrone. This is Venus with a fruit bowl, and now of course we're into the 20th century, and we're getting very much 20th century treatment of Venus. Very experimental, the 20th century, as you know. And she's almost been carved out of wood in this painting, I think you will find. The nose looks as though it's been chiseled out of wood, as the nose on this bust, on this pedestal on the extreme right there is as well. And the colours are rather subdued. What do we know about Cerrone? He was an Italian painter, died in 1961. He was a sculptor and illustrator born in Sardinia. His paintings were mainly sombre affairs, known for his monumental nudes, peasants and family groupings in bare mountainous landscapes. Well, yes, I think we'd have to say this is a sombre, and she's certainly not a desirable Venus by any shape. If a rather ugly Venus, I would say. Then we've got Zygmunt Velázquez. This is Venus with the mirror. Now, this is an interesting take on the mirror, Venus with the mirror. We haven't got Cupid holding the mirror up to Venus's face this time, but rather a satanic figure. We've got the two horns are there, so I think we must assume this is Lucifer or the devil. And this Amazon-like creature, androgynous creature standing there, suggests the attitude of the painter towards it. It's very much in your face, this painting, painted in 1929. You either like it or you hate it. It's a theme we've seen before with Rubens and Titian, of course, the reflection in the mirror. He was a Polish painter of Russian birth, born in St. Petersburg. Velázquez became a member of the Russian Futurist group, an avant-garde movement. He painted primarily compositions with a grotesque flavor, and I think that's what we could call this painting, grotesque. He fought with the Russian army in World War II, and of course it's very red. Red is the predominant color, reds and oranges. So are we to assume that Venus is in hell here? I don't think we can make any assumptions on the strength of this painting. Emilio Centurion, painted in 1934. This is a Creole Venus, but basically it's just a nude model, I think. There's not much Venus about this woman at all. She's just basically a nude, and she's not particularly prepossessing either, is she? Her hair is very dark. She's not bothering to cover her modesty at all. She's just sort of standing there in a casual, louche attitude of stance, if we could call it that. He was an Argentinian, Emilio Centurion, and he worked in different styles and is considered to be one of the greatest painters of Argentinian figurative art. It's 6 foot long, so it's probably quite an impressive nude if you came up close to it in a gallery. Then this is Edward Baird, and as the name might suggest, he's Scots. He hails from Edinburgh, I think, and he's known for his portrait painting. He flirted with surrealism in this painting. You can see that. So we got the surrealist movement is starting to impinge itself on the 20th century in this painting anyway. It was given as a wedding present to a close friend and colleague, but we're not sure. We don't know, at least I don't know, what the happy couple made of it. And Baird became an official war artist in 1942. So apart from the traditional shells painted over the top in the surrealistic style, as we can see, and this jumble of artifacts on either side of the painting, a sort of cropped bust there, you can see that. The actual figure of Venus stands out, and he's spared us nothing. As you can see, he's given her blonde hair. This is the first peroxide blonde Venus I think we've seen, and her body is well lit by light, so that she stands out from the painting. He's almost superimposed upon the painting in a way. So this is Edward Baird's version. And so the surrealist elements to this painting make an easy jump now to the next painting, which was by Salvador Dali. This is called The Dream of Venus. The outrageous Spanish surrealist artist painted this with great technical skill. He was renowned for his striking and bizarre works, as you know. So he's actually used the original Botticelli stance there of the of Venus, but curiously he's positioned it like a huge statue, and what's going on underneath there, over in the lap of this strange figure with two knees there, so we know it's a lap. We seem to have a female rock star there, and then a friend maybe languishing on a couch or a what you call it, a recliner at the side of a pool that you might see at the side. And we've got these curious, very curious growths coming out of this wall. Well, it's surrealist and it's Dali, and you've pretty much said it all there. This is in the lap, between the two legs, brightly coloured, almost like barber's poles, is some sort of, I think, sea creature, I would guess. So I don't know the dimensions of this painting either, actually, unfortunately. So we're into the surrealist movement. We're well into the 20th century now, and here is René Magritte's version of Venus, and he calls her a modern Venus. We just got the one dove there now, no Cupid, as you can see. Very accomplished painting by the Belgian artist, well known for creating a number of thought-provoking images, of which this is obviously one. Often he depicted ordinary objects in an unusual context. His work is known for challenging observers' preconditioned conceptions. Well, there we are. If our preconditioned conception is based on Botticelli's Venus and subsequent Venuses, he's certainly challenging it with this one. Notice how he's used, it's what we might call a two-tone Venus, I think, and her eyes are blanked. And then to emphasize the 20th century treatment of Venus again, we've got a Venus by Jiří Kollár. This one he's called Married Venus, and Venus is very hard to find behind these bars. It's completely dominated by these bars. And if these are the bars which represent marriage, well, yes, they might well be. So they're black in places, but her head, they've split her head in two. So one part of her head is there, and another eye is just there. So we just can't see what Venus looks like in this painting, but it's very colourful. It's, I don't know, again, the dimensions of this painting, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was quite a large painting. He was a Czech poet, writer, and painter. He was also close to Václav Havel before he became president, and was active in Prague in the mid-60s when the communist regime was somewhat more permissive. So that's Jiří Kollár. Whether it's to your taste or not, I don't know, but it's yet another version of Venus, and Venus married this time, and presumably symbolically behind bars. Then we've got Andy Warhol. Now he has gone straight back to Sandro Botticelli's Venus, just taken the head and has made a screen print of it. He was, of course, a leading figure in the art movement known as pop art. An illustrator at first, he flourished in the 1960s using a variety of media, including painting, silk screening, photography, and, of course, film. So that's one Andy Warhol. That's the penultimate Venus that we're going to look at, and bringing up the rear, not Venus's rear, we have Pablo Picasso, and this is Picasso's version of Venus and Cupid. Of course, Picasso is Spanish, but he spent most of his life in France, as you know. One of the most influential artists of the 20th century, with Georges Braque, he co-founded the Cubist movement. Among his most famous works are Les Demoiselles d'Avignon and the anti-war painting Guernica, of course. So there we have Picasso. So there we have 50 faces and interpretations of Venus spanning well over 2,000 years and encompassing most of the major art movements. I hope you enjoyed it, getting up close and friendly to the various versions of the goddess that we've seen today, but I think we've had enough of Venus for one morning. So I'll stop there.